So, user stories. You are familiar with stories. You have grown up together as we all have done. Narratives and storytelling have a lengthy history in human culture. However, user stories, what's up with that? Let's take a closer look at them then. What they are, why they are used, and how they are utilized in Agile development. Hello everyone. This is George from Invensis Learning. Welcome to our YouTube channel. So, everyone is familiar with what they are doing. For example, a product-based company sells the products considering the user's perspective, needs, expectations, etc. In a similar manner, another company sells its machinery with respect to the in-demand user's needs. But, how to know what users are in need of? This is what dealt with user story ads. So today, let's go deeper into those aspects and understand it clearly. So, before we begin, let's look into the agenda. First, we shall discuss what are user stories. Then, we shall see what is Agile in user stories. Post that, we shall discuss advantages of user stories. Next, we shall see the C's in user stories. And post that, we shall understand INVESTig in user stories. And end the session by discussing how to write a user story. Sounds interesting, right? Now let's begin the session by knowing what are user stories. User stories are a component of an Agile methodology that helps shift the emphasis from writing requirements to speaking them. All Agile user stories consist of a few written sentences and, more importantly, a series of discussions regarding the desired functionality. User stories are a fundamental component of the Agile development methodology. However, they are frequently confused with false software requirements. What exactly is a user story? User story is the smallest, piece of work that represents some value to an end user and can be completed within a sprint. This element's primary objective is to place end users at the center of the discussion and to capture product functionality from their perspective. Thus, developers gain a deeper comprehension of what, for whom, and why they are building. Now that we know what a user story is, we shall now get a brief overview of an Agile user story. What is Agile user story? A user story is the smallest unit of work in the Agile framework. From the user's perspective, this is not a feature but rather a final objective. An Agile user story's purpose is to describe how a piece of work will deliver specific customer value. In this context, customers need not be current users in the conventional sense. Instead, they may be internal customers or internal colleagues. In other words, user stories are brief, straightforward descriptions of the desired outcome. Once a consensus has been reached, the team's requirements are added later. A Kanban or Scrum is an excellent method for organizing all potential user stories. Teams in Kanban pull user stories into their backlog and process them through their workflow. In contrast, user stories are added to sprints and burned down throughout a sprint in the Scrum methodology. Consider user stories as the building blocks of Agile frameworks such as epics and initiatives. Initiatives consist of multiple epics. Epics are large work items that have been broken down into stories. After understanding the user stories, now the question comes, why do we need it? Or what's the purpose of the user story? So, let's now discuss that. Why user stories? In Agile software development and product administration, user story refers to a brief, informal, and straightforward description of software features that the software system's end users require. Its primary objective is to provide software features that enhance customer requirements. User stories are a vital component of incremental software development. A user story primarily describes the type of user, their need, and the reason why they need it. Therefore, a user story is a simple description of software system requirements that must be implemented. Other benefits of user stories are: enhances transparency. Everyone can see the index cards or post-it notes on which the user stories are written. This facilitates comprehension, collaboration, and quick decision-making. And because everything is visible to everyone, there is a significant reduction in the risk the team faces. Highest value delivered. User stories assist the team in focusing on the customer's immediate needs. This provides early returns, reduces the organization's investment, and significantly increases the return on investment. Brings users closer together. To better comprehend the user, the team can communicate directly with them to gain insight into their perspective, challenges, opportunities, and other areas requiring attention. Now, as we know the advantages of Agile Use Stories, we shall see the main component that needs to be added here. The C's in User Stories. Initial user stories are generated as part of the discovery process. Then, during delivery, the team continuously adds additional user stories as required. Defining user stories is an efficient method for capturing detailed requirements while maintaining a focus on user objectives. Therefore, they can effectively determine the value for your users. A good user story contains 3 components, also known as the Agile 3 C's. 1. Card. Where are user cases documented? With cards. They are handwritten on index cards, which helps to keep the user stories concise. The card will not include too much or too little information regarding the requirement. Instead, the card will contain only enough information to identify the requirement and facilitate comprehension of the story. The card represents the necessity and is a useful planning tool. It can also be used to record additional information, such as the priority or the story's cost. After finalizing the user story to be selected for the particular sprint, the product owner will hand the user story card to the developers. The following is the standard format for writing the user story on the card. As a user type, I desire or require a goal in order to achieve justification or business value. 2. Conversations. Before including user stories in a sprint, the product owner should seek customer clarification and validation. These discussions are required because user stories can be difficult to interpret. Additionally, background knowledge may be required for implementation. These discussions allow product owners to update stakeholders on the situation. It also allows everyone to digest information appropriately. Conversations can also include email, internal chat, or any other online connection tool for your cross-functional team. 3. Confirmation. Even with the most comprehensive discussion, there is always a degree of uncertainty regarding the requirement that must be created. How do we proceed with the user story and ensure that it corresponds to the requirement? This is accomplished via the third C of the user story, confirmation. Again, acceptance tests are utilized for confirmation. Confirmation is the acceptance criteria that capture the essential requirements and enables us to test the created product to ensure it meets the predefined criteria. Typically, the product owner develops acceptance criteria, which are then refined and expanded during backlog refinement. Developers are responsible for implementing acceptance criteria and acceptance tests. The increment based on the user story should pass the acceptance tests, confirming that the feature has been correctly implemented. At the conclusion of an iteration, the developers demonstrate the completion of the story by meeting the acceptance criteria. A confirmation has been completed. Investing in user stories. Remembering to invest in good user stories is the first step in creating good user stories. INVEST is an acronym that encapsulates the following elements of a good user story: independent, negotiable, valuable, estimable, small, and testable. Let's provide a simple explanation for each. Independent. The story should be as autonomous as possible. Commonly, order independent comes to mind when thinking of independence. In other words, story development can occur in any order. Why is this essential? It enables true prioritization of every single story. In the presence of dependencies, it may be impossible to implement a valuable story without also implementing other, much less valuable stories. Negotiable. A tale is not a legal contract. A story is an invitation to dialogue. The narrative captures the essence of the desired outcome. The actual outcome must be the product of collaborative negotiations between the customer or a customer proxy such as the product owner, the developer, and the tester at a minimum. The objective is to fulfill customer requirements, not to adhere to the user story if that is insufficient strictly. Keep in mind that you can always ask the right question to steer the conversation. Valuable. A story should be beneficial to the customer or user. If a customer cannot formulate a value statement, we may need to deprioritize the story or, if the work is unnecessary, eliminate it entirely. Another reason to have a value statement is that it explains why a particular feature is being developed. Presenting the team with the why, that is, value, in addition to the what, that is, feature, may elicit alternative feature ideas that are easier or quicker to develop but still achieve the same goal and deliver the same business value. In addition, because a story delivers a piece of functionality, the customer can determine how much this functionality will cost and then decide whether or not they still require it. Keep in mind that not all value is monetary. Mitigating risk is valuable. Similarly, knowledge acquisition or learning is a process. Estimable. Developers must be able to estimate the length of a story. It should be written so that developers can comprehend it and have a sense of how to implement it. Properly sized stories, domain knowledge, and technical knowledge are crucial estimation factors. Small stories are obviously small portions of work, but how small should they be? The answer depends on the employed team and methodology. I teach Agile and recommend 2-week iterations, which allows user stories to require an average of 3 to 4 days of work, total. This includes all tasks necessary to complete the story. Additionally, remember not to embellish user stories. Do the simplest thing that is effective, and then stop. Testable. Stories should be testable so that completion can be determined. There should be acceptance criteria for a story. The criteria for acceptance should be objective. Avoid using criteria such as user-friendly, quick, and bug-free. Try to create measurable and testable criteria, ideally automated. For example, 95% of the time, payment verification should respond in 1 second or less. Now, let's discuss on how to write a user story. Before we understand how to write any user story, let's understand who and when a user story is written. Who writes a story? Everyone can compose user stories. It is the product owner's responsibility to ensure that a product backlog of Agile user stories exists, but this does not imply that the product owner writes them. During the course of a successful Agile project, each team member should produce user story examples. Note that who writes a user story is significantly less important than who participates in its discussions. So, when are user stories written? User stories are composed throughout the duration of an Agile project. Typically, a story writing workshop is held near the beginning of an Agile project. Then, everyone on the team contributes to the creation of a product backlog that describes in detail the functionality to be added throughout the duration of the project or a 3 to 6 month release cycle. Undoubtedly, some of these Agile user stories will be epics. Later, epics will be broken down into smaller stories more easily fit within a single iteration. Additionally, anyone can write and add new stories to the product backlog at any time. Now that you know all these, let's see how a user story is written. A user story is a simple description of a feature written from the perspective of the person who desires the new capability, typically a system user or customer. User stories typically adhere to a simple format. As a user type, I want some goals so that some reason. To facilitate planning and discussion, user stories are frequently written on index cards or sticky notes, stored in a shoebox, and displayed on walls or tables. Therefore, they significantly shift the emphasis from writing about features to discussing them. In fact, these conversations are more important than any written text. For example, as a construction project manager, I want our team messaging app to include file sharing and information updates so that my team can collaborate and communicate in real time, thereby expediting the development and completion of the construction project. Writing user stories. User stories are written from the perspective of the user. Consequently, users are given a higher priority during the process when writing user stories. Considerations such as the following are taken into account when writing user stories. Requirements. Duties and their sub-duties. Actual user importance of user comments and comments. User stories are broken down for larger requirements. In addition to this, a few other important principles for creating user stories. Frequently expressed as persona plus need plus purpose, user stories describe the why and what underlying the daily work of a development team's members. Understanding their role as the source of truth for what your team is delivering and why is crucial for streamlining a process. Begin by evaluating the subsequent or most urgent large project. Then, break it down into smaller user stories, and refine it with the development team. Once your stories have been published for the entire team to see, you are ready to begin working. This was just a glimpse of use cases. If you need more info, check out our Certified Scrum Master certification. Invensis Learning provides 2-day instructor-led online CSM certification training which will be delivered by a certified Scrum trainer from Scrum Alliance. This CSM training will help you gain the requisite experience to succeed as a Scrum Master and includes the certification exam cost. Also, if you have any doubts, do let us know in the comments section. Thank you.